Welcome to Ascension of the Chessman, diving into the esoteric, occult, spiritual, and conspiratorial aspects of life, focused on solutions to the problems we face in our everyday lives. Let us ascend above all differences. Let us be the light in darkness, a breath of fresh air to those who can hardly breathe, and together awaken into greatness. This is Ascension of the Chessman with your host, Andre Mytty.
Welcome to the Ascension of the Chessman podcast. I'm your host, Andre Mytty. Today's guest is an author, a spiritual seeker, and an all-around awesome human. Ladies and gentlemen, hobbits and fairies, give a warm welcome to Vaughn Galt. Thank you for coming on, Vaughn. Happy to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andre. I've been doing back-to-back hypnosis sessions online and in person, and I'm exhausted, but got some energy to do a book interview. And I love these book interviews, and I love what we're going to talk about today because it's so relevant to what's going on in current affairs.
For sure. I cannot wait for this conversation. I've always enjoyed every interview I've heard you do, and you're always dropping such gems of wisdom. So I love it. So my first question for every guest is, for those who aren't familiar, can you explain what it is that you do and what woke you up to realizing maybe there's more to this life than you originally taught or thought?
Right. So my background in metaphysics is I'm Laotian. I'm from Laos, and my family's from Laos, but we're American citizens now. But I was born and raised into Buddhism growing up. So I'm very used to the concept of metaphysics and the holographic reality and the different dimensions of consciousness and connecting to Christ consciousness within you and everybody else. All these concepts that many spiritual seekers eventually get to, I'm very familiar with that. My family has, throughout my whole life, sponsored the funding and construction of various artwork in various Buddhist temples throughout Laos.
Wow.
And because of that, I, as a child, I typically did not sit there and listen to the lecture of the day, the different monks and the different monasteries that I attended and would talk about, because they typically talk about the basics, the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, of how not to screw up your life and how not to be a douchebag to each other, which many people still learn to do most of their life, by the way. So I got those basic lessons early on, and what I typically did is I would wander off, and I love art. And if you go to any Buddhist temple anywhere in the world, it is filled with art. And even if you don't know how to read and or understand any of the philosophy is written in the artwork. And so I studied the artwork, and I would ask the different monks and student monks, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? And they would tell me basically advanced Buddhism, which most Buddhists do not know because they can't get beyond the basics. And so the advanced Buddhism is like the Buddhist mandalas and the holographic nature and the multidimensionality of our consciousness and all the things that I talk about in all my book interviews. And what happened for me about, I would say about 20 years ago, when I was going to college at the University of Washington, at the time when I thought it was really respectable. Now I'm kind of questioning because of some of their stances on the current healthcare pandemic. But besides that, I still love my college. I'm still very much a Husky. But when I was going there at the time, I was following a lot of monks that were influencers, and the Dalai Lama was sponsoring initiatives with colleges and universities worldwide to study metaphysics, to study mindfulness and the effects on consciousness and people, to study all these topics, just to find out, is the stuff that Buddhists have been talking about and have been writing for the last 2,500 years, is a lot of it substantiated? Are there holes in the canon that need to be filled in or, re-looked at to clarify it a little bit more for the modern mind? And in the 20 years of following the research that was coming through, I had enough information scientifically through academic research that a lot of the what they call quantum physics, which is metaphysics and Buddhism, the same thing, is
Mhm.
actually true. So I put that information in my Buddhism books, and especially in my 2-book volume of Buddhist mandalas explaining the multidimensionality of, yes, that's the second book. The
Yeah.
first book is Buddhist Mandalas Explore Parallel Realities with Sacred
Yeah.
Geometry. And that's the one with the image of Kuan Yin in the front. And that one will for anybody will basically rewire your consciousness to a higher dimensional field. So you're going to literally start having your own Mandela effect. You're literally going to have your own seeing energy, changing energy, seeing energy waves. You're going to have a kind of a psychedelic experience of reality because now your third eye has been completely been blown open with that book. So I always tell you, if you're
Right.
not ready for that, don't go into the stuff. Go back into the baby stuff.
Yeah.
Go back to the baby stuff. Go back to your churches. Go back to your temples. Go learn the babies and the basics
Yep.
because you're not ready for the other stuff. Because
Nope.
it is a little bit of a trip, and you're going to feel like you're a drug addict with reality,
Yep.
but you're sober. Okay, so I
I
don't
love that.
sugarcoat. Yeah, I don't sugarcoat because I don't really care, because there are different teachers for different levels and different levels. Everybody's at the level that they can handle and
Yeah.
that they're ready for. But some people, and oftentimes most of the people living now, are really, really old souls.
Mm.
They've lived many, many lifetimes. Um, they have been many different incarnations and avatars on Earth. They've lived in other planets. They live in other universes. They live in other dimensions. They have experiences in the spirit world in many different areas. They've had a lot of experiences with consciousness,
Mm.
and so for those people, they want more than what the standard religious canons can offer them,
Mm.
which we all know what they are. They all been force feed down us through various means.
Oh
But
yeah.
if you're ready to go beyond that, and you're ready to own the matrix, and you're ready to really be a conscious creator of the matrix, then the books that I write is for you.
Yes. I read the first one and I'm getting into the second one.
How do
I
you feel
love
about
them.
this? Yeah, the second one is it has the beautiful Tara, which is another female Buddha and Bodhisattva, and
Mhm.
she wakes you up to she's the mother of kind of a awakening, ascension, a
Mm.
transformation of the matrix. She
Beautiful.
reveals the matrix to you, but that one is about Christ consciousness of a multi-dimensional Merkaba,
Mm.
which I clearly define in Buddhism. The word Christ means light, the light of source, God, whatever you want to call it, the
Yes.
consciousness within you. And we're going to talk about the Christ consciousness because I have been
Oh yeah.
saying this, and I said this in book 1 of Buddhist Mandalas. I haven't finished the third book because I'm going to wait a while because I want to see what happens to how the world handles the global
Right.
tyranny, and see see how humanity goes through this life lesson. So I'm gonna add that into the book because um, there isn't a Buddhism book that I'm aware of that incorporates a pandemic slash a global tyranny slash a global rising um, to the greater reality. That there isn't one that talks about that in the form of consciousness and higher consciousness. And this is the segue for humanity to be intergalactic. We have to
Mm.
get through this hurdle. And I
Yes.
talk a lot. Yeah, I talk a lot about star seeds, which is the New Age term for people who've had incarnations outside of Earth. In Buddhism, we've called them toku. Okay, we just wrap it all up as the word toku children, toku adults, people who've had
Mm.
lifetimes outside of Earth. And in the artwork, like you see this a lot in Hindu art, which is the first Buddha,
Mm.
Gautama Siddhartha Shakyamuni. He is from a Hindu Iranian family, and There's a lot of Hinduism in Buddhism because they carry the same truth and logic, just different messengers.
Hmm.
But they have a lot of artwork where they have blue people. A lot of the kings and queens are blue hue. That's not because they have a skin condition. That's because, according to the folklores and in Buddhism of the folklores, in ancient times, um, they had blue aliens
Hmm.
that were very highly spiritual, very advanced, not technologically advanced, but very like sophisticated and beautiful advanced in terms of technology. You couldn't tell the difference. And they came to live on Earth and made their colony. Over time, it became Lemuria,
Hmm.
which is a very spiritually advanced culture in the Pacific, Lemuria, and everybody knows Atlantis and Lemuria. This goes into folklore.
Hmm.
But but after the mega flood, the Lemurian folklores about this advanced spiritual um, Christ consciousness civilization that have these highly enlightened, highly evolved people with extraordinary sixth senses because they have, perfect. They have gone to that level of their consciousness. Um, the mega flood basically wiped out the civilization, and the people who left over. This is in Buddhist folklore archaeology, which I hope to get back into that book when I can fly again, because I'm unvaccinated, so I don't want to deal with any kind of the
Yeah.
issues with the flights. So you guys are missing out on a great book because you're going to medically discriminate against somebody who's unvaccinated. But that's a life lesson for humanity. They'll get through it. But all of these islands in the Pacific Ocean were once part of a major landmass in Lemuria. And
Hmm.
when they all went into mega flood, everybody who survived was either on boats or they went to the top of the mountains. And those top of the mountains is what we have today, the Pacific Islands. And the top of every single Pacific island is a megalith or pyramid or remnants of.
Wow.
And I know exactly what the images look like, the designs, the artwork, because it's written in Buddhist literature, in Buddhist artwork that I studied my whole life. And so when I can finally go back to traveling to these different places and take pictures, because nobody's taking pictures, they're oftentimes in the high mountains in remote areas, and there's and I because of copyright, I have to have my own pictures.
Mm.
So one of my missions in this life is to go to each one of these islands, kind of do the little beach hopping, island by island, all across the Pacific Isle, and go to these tippy tops and take pictures and take notes of what I see in these different settings and basically prove that according to Buddhist Lemurian folklore in their artwork, there is a 100% provability if you follow the folklores that all these islands have a megalith, and it points back that Lemuria did exist. We were once a big, ancient, sophisticated population in the Lemurian region,
Hmm.
and it got sunk by a major flood. And it's all connected because the tops of
Interesting.
every one of these islands has a megalith or a pyramid. And
Right.
that is 100% documented in ancient Buddhism.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's our lineage, and I can prove it.
Wow.
And I worked to eventually prove it in my megaliths, pyramids, and giants of Lemuria.
Interesting.
Um,
I want to
yeah,
hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very fun. So that is my folklore archaeology research based off the Buddhist folklores I have studied
Hmm.
my whole life.
So,
So
so does that tie into like Tartaria or like Pangea, like where we were all one big island, then we split apart? Like,
that not necess that part goes too far back.
okay. I see what you mean.
The Buddhist folklores only go back to the Lemurian folklores. Okay,
Okay.
like one of the big mountains in Buddhist iconology is Mount
Mm.
Meru. Okay, for Lemuria, Mu for Lemuria. That was one of the big mountains that a lot of the Lemurians escaped to and survived the flood. So,
Hmm.
so that's
Interesting.
so there's a lot of evidence that can be substantiated that the folklores of Lemuria in Buddhism are 100% true.
Wow.
Because if they weren't 100% true, I wouldn't be 100% effective in finding them.
Right. This is
So,
fascinating. I
yeah,
can't wait to read that book for sure.
yeah. So if I prove, which I will, prove that all these structures exist, proving that the folklores in
Yeah.
Buddhist artwork is 100% true, because the folklore is true if you can find the real thing to substantiate it. So
Mm-hmm.
the premise, if I prove that, then that proves the folklore that Atlantis did exist.
Wow. Yeah.
So Plato talked about Atlantis, and that's the only record of Atlantis. Well, the folklore that Atlantis had a war with Lemuria. If But you can't prove Atlantis because there's only one big island that sank. That's according to the folklore.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can prove Lemuria because it was a bigger landmass,
Right.
then okay, the other folklore has a high possibility of being true as well.
100%. Yeah. I
Yeah.
I definitely believe in Atlantis. I didn't know it was a belief at this point. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think knowing exactly where it's at, that can be led up to speculation, but I feel like it definitely exists for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the remnants of Lemuria definitely exist. They're in the very tippy tops of every island in the Pacific.
Wow. Yeah, I need to dive more into that for sure.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I said, I can't wait to read the book.
So I'll eventually go into that. But for today, what are we working with in terms of humanity? What we're working with in terms of humanity, and my second book, my second Buddhist mandalas book, Christ Consciousness of a Multidimensional Merkaba,
Mhm.
really fits the wisdom in that really fits to what's going on with current reality. And basically, I've already discussed, and a lot of people are familiar with 2012.
Yeah.
And we've gone and moved, but they don't understand the significance of 2012. Okay, so the significance of 2012 in Buddhism, because we start the calendar based off of Buddha and not Jesus Christ, it is 2012 is the year 2555, so 555. So in Buddhism, 2555 is a year of change over. Okay,
Mm.
change over. And that is also a year where the precessional cycle of the earth, I think it's 25,920 years, something like that, almost about 26,000 years, it goes through a
Yeah,
cycle.
somewhere around there.
We ended that cycle in 2012, 2555 Buddhist era.
Hmm.
What we did was we changed over, and a lot of tribes like the chiefs of the Mayans, Easter Island chiefs, Polynesian chiefs, Buddhists, a lot of them kept that information alive.
Mm.
But the West has lost that information because they disconnected when they created the Catholic Church and the religions that sprang off of the Catholic Church. They disconnected the lineage of the philosophy that what you call Jesus, which is Yeshua ben Yosef in Buddhism,
Hmm.
or Isa in Islam. They disconnected his origins as a Buddhist monk. So you
Mm.
completely lost that information about 2012.
Right.
But we knew this, everybody else knew this. And when 2012 came through, and that's again not talking, poo-pooing any religions that come up, because always religions will always get created, no problem.
Right.
It's like
Yeah. It's
whatever
it's
works for you.
it's funny, just a little backstory. Like I grew up Catholic and I left the church. It just didn't resonate. I disagreed with a lot of things. I was forced into Catholic school, so I grew up with that. And multiple different sects of Christianity. I talking about 2012, like back in 2012, like I was fearing like the end of the world, like
Of course,
Hawaiian
yeah.
prophecy was going to be the end of it all, not understanding. I was seeing it like from a physical perspective rather than metaphysical, or like seeing the deeper meaning behind it.
Yeah.
And coming to realize that years later, like it's just crazy. And yeah, I think you're so
Yeah.
right.
Well, so 2555 Buddhist era 2012, in short, is a changeover. The earth completed a cycle of separation. And the next cycle we complete is a higher frequency cycle. Some people call it new earth, some people call it the fifth dimension, which the fifth dimension is the last dimension of consciousness where you can still exist in the physical reality. All the other levels of consciousness are basically within your own consciousness. It starts sounding like those sci-fi movies where you're kind of out in the, it's happening in your memory, in your mind, in your dreamscape. They're just higher levels of consciousness. So and they already proven this in science that when they study the human brain, we can access up to 11 dimensions of consciousness. The fifth dimension is just the last physical one. All the other dimensions happen in the level of consciousness, and that's why people who have higher frequencies, who are much more, higher resonance, typically have to take a lot of B12 because there's a lot of circuits going on in their head. Okay,
Yeah.
they're activating more aspects.
Mhm.
And when you do meditation, you're going into 5D and you're going well above. You're going into Christ consciousness, connecting to that source energy of divinity. Because everybody's connected to that. And that's why you have those healing abilities. A lot of
Mhm.
healers get into those levels of consciousness when they're trying to facilitate healing. So anyways, a lot of that is in the book, but the point that I'm making about 2012 is it was a year of changeover. And when it changed over, all it did was say, okay, now we're doing a new processional cycle. It's a higher frequency cycle. And as a higher frequency cycle in these higher dimensions, um, you all, everybody, are now going to be living these higher energies. So to know what it is to understand the higher energies of what's going on in the earth and everybody who lives in it, it's like this analogy. Let's say you are a sailor and you're on your sailboat and you're trying to man the sailboat by yourself. Your third dimensional self-controlling, you know, self. And it's worked for you for a while, but now the wind changes. The wind picked up speed. And when the nothing's changing your reality, everything looks the same. The boat looks the same, the house looks the same, the pier looks the same. You can't see any physical changes, but something's changing your reality. And what's happened is the energy has changed. The wind has picked up. And when the wind picks up, you're doing the same thing like you always have, and you're having a hard time getting somewhere, doing something. So if you are mindful to the changes and you recognize that, you're going to get help. You're all collectively, as a unified force, going to man the boat together. And you're going to do a lot less work together. And you're going to take advantage of the wind that's going to push things faster for you. And you're going to take just a couple knots. You're going to go from point A to a completely different destination, maybe something much more beautiful, tropical, and have a great time doing it with less effort. That's what's happened. Things will what you are will come out.
Mhm.
What you want and what you project will happen faster. You'll manifest at a much faster speed than you did before. Time is going faster as well, which they've already proven that as well. So everything's moving faster. What happens that people don't realize this in these higher energies, in these higher dimensions, is that you have entered unity consciousness. Okay. The consciousness of higher frequencies is unity because there's a lot of there's a lot more activities and things going on. They don't work in this lower dense vibration of separation.
Yeah.
So if you don't recognize that and you don't understand that, which most people still don't understand, that we've been in unity consciousness, in the fifth dimensional consciousness since 2012, you can look at current affairs. And if you look at history, you had the civil rights history, which is happening in just the U.S. You didn't see countries in the other worlds running civil rights movements for the U.S. You had the women's march, the women's protest in the 60s and 70s. That was just going on there. You didn't see it in the rest of the world for the most part. Well, now since 2012, whatever we are bringing out and we're doing it together. So we did the Black Lives Matter together. Guess what? People in other countries were doing it with us. Why is that? Weird. You had the Women's March in the United States, and then you had people in different countries all over the world join in the Women's March. Why? Because they feel compelled to. You had the pandemic. Now everybody's doing the pandemic. All pandemics in history have always been isolated a little bit, for the most part. But now everybody in the world is doing it. And then you do the vaccination rollout. Everybody's doing it. And now you have the emerging tyranny with the mandates and the passports and the show me your papers reality. And now everybody. So for the first time, if you look at current affairs and you look at current affairs and you look at current affairs in the past, the defining difference in my mind is right around 2012. All of a sudden, we started doing things together, and we're just doing it blindly. We have no clue that we're actually creating this together and we're having these experiences together. So, in these higher energies, you can create heaven on earth together, or you can create hell for everybody together, but it will always be together because we're in unity consciousness. And that's the thing about unity consciousness. That's the thing about these higher energies. If you can't handle it and you don't know how to use the tools effectively, you can literally create yourself a horrid world and a horrid reality for yourself because you're creating unconsciously from your third dimensional messed up perspective on reality. You're bringing your old third dimensional baggage, your mommy, daddy issues, your issues of everybody else. You're bringing it up into these higher energies and thinking you can still create the same way. But what you're creating in these higher energies is more of the crap that you brought with you at a faster, more escalated, more exponential scale, because that's what happens with the abundance of these higher energies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's mind blowing. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm still reeling that one in. Like, holy cow. Yeah, keep going. That was amazing.
Yeah. So that's what's going on right now. And we literally are at a crossroads with our current reality because there are like Earth is already jumping in the Schumann resonance way far beyond human capacity. She's already there and she's bringing you along, kicking and screaming and dragging your feet.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't like it, you can find a way out. And it's going to sound, it sounds a little callous, but I do quite a bit of hypnosis. I use two different script, one for in-person, which is QHHT by Dolores Cannon, and then the other one is remote, which I do more often with clients all over the world, and that's BQH with Candace Graw. But anyways, just different scripts, but Buddhists have been using scripts for deep meditation, or what we call modern day hypnosis, for a very, very long time, to get into that brainwave, that high brainwave frequency where you connect to the Christ consciousness of source and do whatever you're intending to do. But the thing is that everybody needs to sit down with themselves and really have a deep dive into what they create in their reality. If something's not working, they need to look back. In my book on Buddhist Guide to Manifest Parallel Realities, using the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path in the Age of Consciousness breaks this down for you. It breaks down most common issues that people have using the Eightfold Path. You can see where your thought process is. Where did you pick up bad behavior patterns, bad thought process? Where did you pick up conditioning from your mom and dad and your upbringing, from your childhood, from your church, from your culture? Where did these behavior patterns get picked up? Okay, because there's no such thing as bad conditioning. It's just it doesn't serve you. Okay, so everybody is born with a blank slate, and everybody's born, and they don't come in as babies and start thinking that they're a piece of crap. They don't come in talking bad about themselves and putting themselves down. They don't come in thinking they're inferior or they subjugate themselves. Babies don't do that.
It's a learned trait for sure.
Yeah. These different aspects that we see ourselves at, which most humanity does, is learned from watching and observing and unconsciously picking up programming from how their parents behave and treat themselves. Well, that's how I'm going to have my relationships. How other people in society, what they watch on TV, all the external factors in the hologram is what it's feeding into babies' minds. And so they unconsciously are picking up all this subconscious programming over time. And then they grow up and they're playing out the same type of marriage 4, 5 generations back. Everybody's role playing the same broken record over and over again. And then, they're doing the same things. And then at some point it hits a head and they're like, I'm successful. I got my token spouse. I have my children, whatever. I've gotten the things that I think I'm supposed to be happy with, but I'm not happy.
Right.
I'm not happy with any of this. So and why is that? If you sit there and you break down and you go back through, okay, where did I get this concept that I needed to be in this type of relationship? And you look back in the relationships in your life, and then you see, oh, I picked it up from this person in my family or my parents. I picked up those specific characteristics. I adopted those as my own, which was never yours. It's theirs. They weren't yours. It was for you to create your own template of how you were going to have that relationship, your own template of what your friendships was going to be like. It was for you to look at what's available to you and not just adopt everybody else's programming, but to look at the different information that's available to you and decide and create your own model of who you are going to be, your own template of your relationships, what it's going to be, your own template of what your friendships are going to be, what your career would look like. You were supposed to create your own templates, but instead, most people get lazy and they just start taking other people's programs and then trying to fit it onto their body, and it doesn't fit. Yeah. And so in these higher energies, you're trying to create your next best experience in these higher energies, that things are moving faster, more exponentially, compounded. And what are you creating faster, exponentially, and compounded? You're creating the bad programming that never worked for you. Okay. Totally. That's what many people were doing.
Totally recycling the trauma.
We're recycling the trauma
until we heal. Yeah.
On an escalated scale. So that's the first thing that people need to recognize. The other thing that people need to recognize as well is that when it comes to consciousness, and Buddhists are very good about this. When it comes to consciousness is you. Every single person is a fractal expression of source. Okay, so I am source being Von Galt. You are source being Andre Mytty. Source is being everybody, the good, the bad, the in-between. Source is everybody. Anything in creation is created out of source. Yes. The good, the bad, the everything, okay? Everybody has different levels in their understanding. Not everybody's in the same level of consciousness. That's why not everybody has the same frequency. And the thing is that when people are looking at, they're trying to exist in their reality. Like right now, we're trying to exist in this reality of trying to come out of the pandemic without adopting tyranny worldwide.
Right.
Everybody has a certain position.
Hmm.
And the thing with consciousness is not either right or left. It's not in the polar opposites, because just like a pendulum, consciousness will always kind of move back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, it gets to the middle way and it stays steady.
Mm.
Okay, that's why Buddhism, they say the middle way, always
Middle
stay in the
path. Yeah.
middle. Middle path, middle path.
It's
The
all about
reason why
balance. Yeah,
it's all
totally.
about balance. That's why you put your hands together in the middle path in
Yep.
gratitude for the gift that
Mm.
you were given. That you
Yes.
want the reason why the middle path is so important and constantly hammered in Buddhism, the middle path, is because it is dangerous to be so far into either side that you basically cannot hear any other information. You basically fall
Yes.
into what they call a cult mentality. When you're
Mm.
in a cult, you're so far into the Kool-Aid that you can't even see the truth or recognize the truth, even if it's in front of you.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to give you an example, and this is my example, real world example. And I've been interested in this phenomenon. I've been like, this is very interesting, a phenomenon. So I'm here in the United States, like you,
Mm.
and I have never but been part of a political party. I'm never going to be a part of a political party. I'm a swing voter, which means I vote wherever I want. I
Right.
don't have my identity is not dictated to me by my party.
Hundred
I do
percent.
not vote down party lines. I don't care.
Same.
Yeah, so that's the same thing with religion. I'm Buddhist. I don't care what religions anybody is. Whatever works for you, if it works for you, that's wonderful. If it doesn't work for you,
Right.
then find something that works for you. It's all about creating the best experience. I understand that
Exactly.
because I understand the metaphysics of consciousness. So I give everybody the free will and freedom to create whatever reality they want to create for themselves.
Yes.
Now, with this current thing that we're dealing with the emergent tyranny, for some people they don't see it as tyranny, but you have people on the far right who are very conservative.
Right.
I'm using United States terms because it doesn't apply to other countries. But in the United States, we're very polarized into our cult political identity.
Oh yeah.
Or you have people in the far left who are very, very progressive, and they're so far gone into each other's sides that they can't see information from the other side.
Yep.
And so the danger in being so far to the right is that you don't see when you are doing things that could marginalize and demonize people who are in a different position than you. So they didn't understand like the Black Lives Matter,
Mm.
whereas people on the progressives on the left, they the whole Black Lives Matter for them is just about finding equality in a system that seems to consistently make it harder for them to, succeed.
Right.
So in short, we don't have to go to a detail, but just in short, so one side couldn't see the other side. Now
Mm.
that the pendulum swang one way, okay. Now here's the thing: consciousness always gives everybody a chance to redeem themselves. What happens? The pandemic comes around. The pandemic comes around, and now the mandates and the passports come around. I'll take you the case of New York, where they have the mandates and passports going on and trying to institute this Gestapo. The people who were so for the vaccines and so into the narrative that a disease has 99.7% survival rate, that's
Right.
without ivermectin or any other kind of vitamins or any other kind of supplements that help boost your immune system or early treatment, you'll still survive
All right.
unless you have some issues, but you'll still survive. They were so wrapped into that they didn't see any of the other information that the other camp was seeing. And
Mm.
the other camp was seeing information from legitimate sources like the FDA about adverse reactions, so legitimate sources about people who had adverse reactions and saying, I'm being censored. I can't even talk to my own family and friends
Oh
on
yeah.
social media to tell them about what's going on. They didn't see the clinical trials data that showed that it wasn't 100% effective or safe. All the information they didn't see because they're so wrapped up so far into their progressive narrative, that it was dangerous for them to not be open-minded enough to see the other side. So you see the dangers of being so far into one or the other because you fall into that cult mentality. And what's happening now in New York is that you have people who can't go to restaurants or engage in society without getting the COVID-19 vaccine. Well, the funny thing is, I think about almost 70% of Black Americans in New York are unvaccinated. For their own reasons, Tuscany experiments and other experiments in the past, they have their own legitimate reasons to be cautious.
Right.
So, and that's perfectly fine.
Totally.
But now all of a sudden, in order for them to get through this emerging tyranny that is basically a new way where they have basically been marginalized in society based on their health status or their vaccination status, in order for them to overcome this, now Source is going to force them to eventually get over their issues and make peace with the right, who also don't want the mandates and the passports because they don't want, not all of them want to go get jabbed.
Right.
So now they have to work together.
Yes.
So the only way through this is for the right and the left, vax and unvax, to stop being in third dimensional consciousness of separatism, demonizing each other, marginalizing each other, and the tribal cult mentality, to get out of those old frequencies and recognize that they need to unite together as one consciousness in order to move forward and create a new reality in these higher energies where everybody can coexist, whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, without any kind of marginalization, and that they get all the information so that they can treat themselves early if they got COVID, because it's already been proven that the vaccines don't do shit for you. Okay, right. They're not going to protect you from COVID.
Yep. You can still get it. You can still spread it.
Yeah, they didn't do anything for you. If anything, there's the argument that you may have potentially just poisoned yourself. But that's that's one of the arguments. Right. But everybody's argument is completely valid because there is no long-term safety data.
Exactly.
The drug companies have you're the experiment. So everybody's opinions of what could happen is completely valid because there are no long-term safety studies. Right. And if any of the drug companies and doctors say it's safe and effective, they don't know it because there's no long-term safety studies.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. They just say safe and effective, but they don't say for what. Like, define safe and effective.
Yeah, you don't have any long-term safety studies, and you only had 6 months of human trials. Not even 6 months, 3 months of human trials that you before you publish it and present it to the FDA. So 3 months to 6 months, that's debatable, is not long-term. Okay, so you can't. So nobody really knows, and so the thing is that what we are seeing, what everybody is seeing, is they're seeing their garbage come up for them in this pandemic. So you're seeing the politicians and the garbage that comes out from that. You're seeing the suppression and propaganda on a major scale. Oh, yeah. You're seeing the tyranny worldwide on a major scale. You're all this stuff, this third dimensional stuff that we have been suppressing and hiding, is coming up on a major scale, and everybody is going to feel it. Now, what we have is the choice to decide what next best experience do we want to co-create together, because we will create it together.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And to be honest with you, I am not in the camp where I'm going to create a reality where I'm going to force anybody to get a experimental vaccine, even if it's not experimental and at some point they start making different versions down the road and they approve it. Right. I don't really care.
Right.
If you don't want to get it, it's the same agenda. If you don't want to get it, you don't have to get it. If you feel that you need to get it, then and you think that you need it for whatever your personal reasons, that's fine. You need it for whatever your personal reasons.
Yeah. Live and let live. Like, my body, my choice.
Exactly. Which is funny too, because the progressives are all like, my body, my choice, abortion argument, and then flip it on the other side, because this is what consciousness does,
Yeah.
is it tests you and then flip it on the other shoe and see if you really believe it.
Yep.
And consciousness flipped it on the other shoe
Oh yeah.
and they didn't believe it.
Yep.
So it's just like, okay, see, that's where many people fail the test.
Yep.
So consciousness will always flip it on. If it's true, it'll fit on both shoes.
Yes.
Otherwise, you don't really believe what you say you believe. And that's how consciousness tests you. They will put you into a physical experience to test your acumen of how well you know the material.
Mm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
most people don't know the material. When people said, I would never support tyranny, I would never support a government that is going to, basically put a Gestapo in society in place.
Right.
Okay, consciousness is like, okay, a lot of people reincarnate at this time from the Holocaust. So they're like, okay,
Mm.
let's try a modern version of this. Try a modern version of this.
Yeah.
And what's the modern version? Oh, the flu has gotten really scary now.
Right.
And will you allow the same things to happen in disguise of safety? And a
Right.
lot of people have.
Have
So they failed.
Have you heard of that book, The Seventh Turning?
No, tell me about it.
So it's like every 80 years, it like recycles, like time like recycles, and we like go through a very similar event. I'm yet to read it, but I've heard it talked about a lot, and yeah, I want to read it very soon, but
Yeah.
it's that same concept.
Yeah, it sounds very fascinating. Yeah, cycles happen a lot in small cycles, big cycles.
Right.
So this is, the cycles happen a lot and in history.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in college, I used the gain theory, which this man in the early 1900s, he had noticed the cycles in the stock market and he was betting on the cycles. He had point out the cycles that they make a certain pyramid graph in the graph. And when they make when you see a certain pyramid, it's going to jump either way. And so he would just, bet on that. And they ended up taking all his manuscripts from everybody and basically this getting rid of it so that nobody learned about the game theory.
Right.
So nobody learned about how he measured the stock market. He was very successful. So I read about that, and I read like a one paragraph of how he did it. Somebody had mentioned it. So I got all the charts of the stock markets, and I started looking for the pyramids where it comes to a head. And then I started a small little account, and I started to bet on the commodities market based on these pyramids that's on the chart.
Right.
And like I had a really high percentage. I mean, I would turn $100 option into a $2,500 payout within like a month or two. And I got so good that they thought that I was inside trading. So then I was like, oh, not inside trading. I'm just trying out a theory that I read in a book. What a concept. So, but it's totally true. And there's small cycles in everything.
Wow.
So the small cycles and there's big cycles, and we're going through the new big cycle, 26,000 years in the higher fifth dimensional consciousness. So, but that's really what everybody needs to realize, is that we're in the higher dimensions. We're going to create what we are faster, more exponentially, and we're going to do it together, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
And when you do it together, it's a matter of everybody's adding their piece to the pie, and whatever that pie shakes out to look like, whatever the compromise is, that's what we're going to live with. Okay. So, who the movers and shakers, the people who are moving and shaking, those are the ones who are throwing their little piece into the pie. And if the good people who don't want that kind of tyranny reality are pushing back, and they're throwing their lawsuits, they're throwing their initiatives, they're throwing their protests, they're throwing their social media comments, and whatever, any different way that they're doing to push against it, that's what's going to fill up this pie. And all the rest is just going to slowly, unless they put more of their efforts in, it's going to overwhelm and it's going to settle out. Whatever settles out is what the collective compromise is going to be. And I'm hoping that it's not the tyranny reality, because the tyranny reality that will come into fruition if we allow it to go to basically go the way that a lot of healthcare professionals want, like the CDC wants, is everybody is going to be getting boosters on a frequent basis every single year. If you haven't died by the second, third, or fourth, maybe you'll die in the sixth or seventh. I don't know. We'll find out. We have no long-term safety data, but we're making the rules as we go along. And you're going to be ostracizing people and marginalizing people. You're literally creating a second Holocaust.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and your compliance is what is creating it. And by the time you create it, it's too late.
Right.
It starts small. But if you see,
yeah, I mean, you can be put in handcuffs for simply not wearing a mask on an airplane currently.
Yeah. What kind of reality is that?
Right.
I mean, and if you think that's okay, I'll tell you, because so I've had some discussions with people who just, they really love the Buddhism books. They love the book talks. They love the podcasts. But I didn't go along with the mandates and passports. And so immediately, because they're so into their cult political identity, and they can't, and both parties, both sides in the United States are guilty of this.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
They want to put you in a box.
They want to put you in a box. So
put a label.
Right. So all of a sudden, I'm anti-vaxxer, even though I've had my childhood vaccines. So that's not applicable. I must be white, even though I'm an Asian female. I'm not a white male.
Right.
I'm Asian female. I must be evangelical, a radical Christian. I'm Buddhist.
Right.
Doesn't fall into that. Well, then I must be a Trump supporter and I must be Republican. To be honest with you, I have nothing against Trump. I wish him the very best. I just didn't agree with his policies, so I did not vote for him. I'm not the biggest fan, so that's fine. I'm also not a big fan of Biden.
Right.
So
Me neither.
whatever. So and that's fine. So but so I'm not. So I'm being branded as that. But no, then you must be a Democrat. No, I'm not a Democrat or a progressive. I didn't vote all that way that they do either. I go back and forth. I'm what you call a swing voter. I don't have any political affiliation, so you can't box me in one or the other. You can't just go down the line and say, well, you must fall into these identities if you pick this, or you must fall into that identities if you pick that. You know what that is? That's called AI thought process. AI can't understand people who are free thinkers, who can go back and forth,
100%.
who can go, well, I'm not really so jazzed about, some of the policies on Trump, but at the same time, I'm not jazzed about the mandates and passports under the guise of safety. I'm not jazzed about these coercion tactics either. So, a computer cannot figure that out. That's what we're training computers and AI to basically try to understand human psychology through polarization. Well, when human psychology upgrades their consciousness to fifth dimensional or higher, computers can't equate that, because fifth dimensional or higher is not so polarizing.
Unity consciousness.
Unity consciousness. Yeah. Unity consciousness, but still independent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, taking your power back, and got to heal through that trauma to walk the path to be an example for everyone else, be a better reflection.
Yeah. Totally. So that's the thing that's going on. That's the thing that people need to realize, is they need to stop putting each other in these boxes, because when you put each other in these boxes, in these polarizing boxes, the furthest away from being Christ consciousness, or from being disconnected from source within you, is to start seeing others as separate from you. It's to start seeing others, you see others as separate from you, and then you demonize them, and then you marginalize them, and then you outright hate them, and you don't have anything left to do but kill them.
Yeah, exactly. It's tribalism, and it's very primal, and it's like, what are we doing here? Like, Okay, even our two options we have, like Republican, Democrat, like they all have their list of ideals, and it's
Right.
like you have to choose one or the other. Which ideals, percentage wise, do you agree with more? And it's like, what about the ones you don't agree with? Like, can't you
Right.
still be an individual and not pick a team and like still vote for
Hmm.
somebody? But even the options we have to vote for are like, how are these the best two options out of the
Yeah.
millions of people in this country?
Yeah. And but then you take all those identity politics and you look at other countries in the world that are protesting the emergent tyranny, and they don't want the
Right.
green pass, they don't want the health pass, they don't want the Gestapo. Is
Totally.
it apply to them? Are they all Trump Republicans,
Right.
radical evangelicals
Oh, I love that.
who are
Totally.
believing in end times? Are they all anti-vaxxers too?
Did they all
It
come
doesn't
to the
apply.
did they all come to the January 6th
Yeah,
Capitol
do they all,
riot?
does that apply?
Yeah,
Absolutely not. If the
exactly.
if it is the truth, it will fit on both shoes.
Right.
But it's
Totally.
not the truth. It doesn't fit on both shoes, and that's why you know it's not the truth. That's why you know there's more to it.
I like that.
There's something else that you're not seeing. It has to fit on both shoes in order
Yeah.
to walk forward. If it doesn't fit, then you can't walk forward.
Mm.
Okay. So when people, and it is very fascinating too as a Buddhist, and this is what I'm watching this and I'm going, well, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting. And I'm taking notes in my mind for book 3 of Buddhist Mandalas, which basically closes out
Mhm.
my understanding of the holographic nature of reality that we create from within our consciousness. And it's understanding our consciousness that we create from. So you understand your old programming. And now that you understand your old programming, you can reprogram and create new templates.
Oh
And you
yeah.
move forward and you create your next best experience. Well, how do you create the next best experience based on the things that you would like to experience, knowing that you don't want to create out of bad programming that you have adopted from your conditioning? And
Mm.
that's where many people are not very close to getting to. But if you get to that, then you can create very, very nicely. And the thing that I find interesting is if you go through and you read comments and like you go to like I'm very familiar with the major news stations narrative. Okay, we all know this. We know not the nightly news what the narrative is. We all know that. They
Right.
don't report on any of the vaccine injured. They don't
Oh
report
no.
on any of the lack of safety or any of the lack of efficacy or what's happening in other countries of the world. They're suppressing the information that's coming out of Israel, that's coming out of the UK. Just to kind of keep the citizens in the United States in the dark because we rolled out later than everybody else.
Right.
And we're not counting breakthrough cases. The CDC said they're not counting breakthrough cases. They only and so it's so the reason why they're not counting breakthrough cases is because there's a high number of breakthrough cases.
Mm.
Because other countries that are highly vaccinated, most of the hospitalizations are breakthrough cases because they count it all equally. We don't count it so that it makes it look like it's the unvaccinated, it's a pandemic unvaccinated. It's another coercion technique.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the point that I make about that is if you look at consciousness and you read comments on like any kind of like social media boards, like YouTube channel on into the news broadcast or whatever,
Hmm.
and you watch the angle of how they the same thing, how they report it, and then you look at the comments and you have people saying the unvaccinated should just die.
Mm.
Just only hospital beds for the vaccinated. Let the unvaccinated die. And you're like, wow, you've literally gotten so far into the polarizing cult mentality on your sides that you see the others that's not on your side. You've demonized them, you subjugated them, you marginalized them, you subhuman them,
The
and
oxymoron of wishing death upon others to save lives.
yeah, exactly. Like you literally when you that's the first that's why the book of Buddhist Mandalas 2, Christ Consciousness of Multidimensional Merkaba, I talk about this in that book.
Mm.
And the wisdom in there really is relevant to what's going on right now
Yes.
because everybody should look at their comments and they should look at themselves. And if
Mm.
they're making comments like um or even on the opposite side, let's say somebody who's really, really against the vaccine and they're really, into the conservative side in the United States. It only applies in the United States, these polarizations for the most part.
Yeah.
But they're going, well, the vaccinated, they didn't listen. They should have known. They should die too. So, like I said, once you see
Ridiculous.
yourself as separate, once you stop seeing everybody and remembering that everybody is a fractal expression of source consciousness, experiencing source through themselves as themselves,
Mm.
and everybody is having their own individual yet collective experience. Once you see them as no longer connected to you through source, and you see them as separate, that's the first way that you make your way to, you see them as separate, and then you marginalize them, and then you demonize them as subhuman.
Mm.
And once you marginalize and demonize them as subhuman, the only thing left to do is kill them off. And
Mm.
now you are rightful in killing off that the subjugated group because they're not part of your tribe, and
Yeah.
you feel justified in killing them off. Okay, that's what's happened to our society, and people don't recognize what they are walking into. And that's why it's so dangerous right now, what we're experiencing worldwide. And you can read the comments and you see these major news stations make these slant angle reporting, which is not accurate, because if it was the truth, it would apply to all the countries equally. It would be a pandemic of the unvaccinated in Israel, in UK,
Right.
in Australia, in everything. Because if it's the truth, it will fit on both shoes.
Oh,
But it's
yeah.
not the truth that it doesn't fit on both shoes, which tells you it's not the complete truth. There's more to the story.
Totally.
And so you look at these people and they're so in fear
Oh, yeah.
that they're literally rooting for the genocide of the unvaccinated.
Totally. It's
They're accomplice to murder.
fear is the opposite of love, and it's like you see it all around you. They're telling us to separate from one another, don't give people hugs, like don't interact with people, stay in your house, communicate through Zoom if you have to. Like it's all separation. None of it is
It's all
coming
separation.
together. It's like
And
build back together.
Yeah,
Separated,
yeah.
you can't be together.
Right. See, and the vaccine doesn't do anything to protect you. So it's not even relevant
Right.
in the discussion. Regardless of your vaccination status with COVID, you're still going to get it.
Right.
Some people may never get it because they have a working immune system with T cells. But anyways, everybody has potential to getting it, and everybody has potential to surviving it. And there is early home treatments that you can use, even if you don't have access to get a prescription for the human version, the human version of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, which everybody can get on honeybee.com. So it's honeybeehealth.com, and it's a pharmacy online in the United States.
Is it pretty affordable?
It is pretty affordable. I bought my ivermectin for humans. This horse dewormer propaganda is not true. Because I have a podcast. My podcast is Macabre Chakras, and I have people all over the world send me information, and they're going, what is going on in the United States? We use our country is giving us home packets that we can just go to the hospital and pick up, and it has zinc and ivermectin and how to use it and what to look for in early onset respiratory illness. If it's more than the common flu, they have little pamphlets, and it's like, we all have this. We're in a poor country. We all have this. You can just go to the hospital and just go grab it. They're just handing it out like candy.
Right.
Because they don't want you to swarm the system. Take the ivermectin, take the zinc, take the home care, pamphlet.
Oh yeah,
This is the new cold and flu regimen, along with whatever cold and flu regimen you already have going on. If you feel that you already have a more serious respiratory issue, it's more serious than the common cold and flu, then here's your home care packet. Everybody knows it.
Yeah, I mean,
in other countries.
Joe Rogan was getting eaten alive by the media for saying he had COVID, his symptoms were mild, and he was treating it with ivermectin and I forget what else. I think zinc or something.
Yeah, you think, yeah, the cells just need certain essential vitamins to kind of beef up its immunity. So ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what most the doctors worldwide
Right.
is saying, and then you take it with zinc because zinc kind of helps the medicine get into the cells early on. You take it early on. It's
Right.
just like when you get the cold and flu. You don't wait 3 days to all of a sudden go give
Right.
yourself cold and flu medicine.
Right. And if you have the flu, you're not just like, yeah, I'm gonna go get groceries and run a bunch of errands and like,
Yeah, I'm gonna
like
go work through it. No, I'm
yeah,
gonna.
no, you call in sick to work and you stay home and
You
rest.
stay at home. You have your cold and flu regiment that you are used to. Everybody's been trained to use a cold and flu regiment. It's not like, oh, you got the cold. Okay,
Yeah.
well, why don't you wait 5 days until you get really, really, don't treat it with anything. Wait till 5 days until you get really, really bad. Then come to the hospital when you're when you might have pneumonia, and then
Right.
we might do something for you, maybe. That's not that's not a compassionate healthcare system.
Heck
And
no.
that's completely against our normal logic of how you treat yourself
Yep.
with the cold and flu early. You get cold and flu, you immediately going, I think I'm coming down with something. I gotta kick in my regiment, whatever my regiment is. Well, the new regiment in other countries, and I have friends in other countries, and they tell me, and my podcast listeners and so forth, in other countries, the new regiment is whatever you have your cold and flu plus ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or whatever, and they have different versions in other countries, by the
Hmm.
way. It's the same as ivermectin, but they have different versions of it that they create on their own because it's cheaper for them.
Hmm.
And it's just a compound of certain vitamins that they put together to
Right.
make it. So, but anyways, they have their version of ivermectin with zinc, and and they share the information, and that's part of their new. This is the new normal. This is the new endemic. You have your
Mhm.
normal cold and flu plus the
Yep.
ivermectin version in your country with zinc, and that is your new regimen. Everybody's been doing it. India's been doing it ever. They turned their back on the vaccine because they're like, oh, we don't like these vaccine injury stories that are coming in. We're actually getting COVID now for the first time. They're getting all these injuries, and so they turned their back on it, and they just basically just start giving everybody, here, take ivermectin, here, take this, and they
Mhm.
started doing the home packets, and they don't have. You don't hear anything about India.
Right. You
They're
don't.
not having a surge. It's
You
over.
you really don't. Yeah.
It it's over in India. All that they're dealing with right now is basically the vaccine injured.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah. It's
they stopped the bleeding. They
there's
stopped the vaccination rollout there.
it's like the whole thing with ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, like zinc, like all of those aren't the vaccine. So it's like, God forbid we talk about anything but this jab. Like
Yeah. So,
they
and it's
push it no
just
matter what.
exactly. So, it's very much greed, and this is
Oh yeah.
conversations we can have for a very, very long time. But I tell everybody, like, I got it for your question about ivermectin. Um, so for me, I was never going to get the COVID-19 vaccine from the very get-go. I was never going to
Right.
get it.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
the reason why is because I took the flu shot a long time ago, and I had paralysis of 4 hours. When you can't move for 4 hours, you say fuck that shit for the rest of your life.
Right.
So I was never going to ever take the flu shot ever again. My doctor told me that, and my doctor, he's passed away, but at the time he had like 50 years of
Hmm.
practicing medicine. So, anyways, he told me before he passed away, Vaughn, never, ever, ever take the flu shot or any version of that again. Because if you had a reaction like this, they always update it with new things. You're going to get you have a very high risk of getting the adverse reaction. And so I remembered that. And so when this came through, this since it's another version of the flu, I'm like, well, I'm never going to get it. And I even tried because my brother's handicapped, and like many people, they do it because they have a loved one and they want to protect the loved one who is compromised in some way. My brother's handicapped, so I decided, oh well, maybe I will get it because it's early on and adverse reactions weren't coming out quite yet. This is back in January
Hmm.
in the United States, and I went through the Department of Health, DSHS, is the organization for caregivers for my handicapped brother. So I went to their website because you can register early. And at the time they had, certain questions. And one of the questions is, have you ever had an adverse reaction or any kind of reaction to any kind of vaccination, including the flu shot? And I said yes. And it said, now you don't qualify. I said, okay, well and they pointed me to the CDC, the website that said, these are the people that should never take the COVID-19 vaccine. People who've had adverse reactions to the flu shot or any kind of vaccination in the past.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, that don't qualify. I didn't think anything of it. Now there is no no barometer against it. Like everybody qualifies, no matter what. You got cancer, you qualify. You're pregnant, you qualify.
Right.
You're a baby, you qualify.
Yeah.
So like
you get some freebies along with it. Like we'll give you a
yeah,
free joint, free donuts. What else?
yeah. It makes you,
Biden was trying to offer $100 payments for getting it. Like it's bribery now. It's literally bribery.
yeah, it's bribery, it's coercion, it's
Yep.
mandates. Now it's the passports, it's the media, pandemic and vaccinated.
Oh
That
yeah.
that Gestapo's going on still. In other countries, they're looking at us going, "What is wrong with you guys? Do you guys see what?"
Isn't it
It's
like
so obvious.
9% of the world's vaccinated or something like that?
I don't really trust those numbers.
Right. And that's not even that big, but even if that's like inflated, it's like, okay.
Yeah, I don't
not-
really necessarily trust those numbers.
Yeah, your plan's not working out too well.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people who are not registered who live in the villages and in the countryside who live off grid.
Yeah.
I mean, we know in Australia, the Aboriginals, there's over 1 million Aboriginals that live in the Australian countryside.
Mm-hmm.
And the Australians aren't allowed to go into those forest areas. There's over 1 million last time that they estimated that live there.
Wow.
Okay, wild in their own culture, the way the Aboriginals have always lived. If everything happened in the rest of society, they will still exist.
Right. Exactly.
So I don't necessarily, I think those numbers are questionable. And I saw when I was watching Biden, and God bless him, I hope he really gets it together.
Right.
But anyways, when I was watching Biden tell about the mandates, he said that there was 80 million Americans who were defiant, who are unvaccinated. But then I saw an MSN report on YouTube that was talking about it, about his announcement, and it said 100 million Americans are unvaccinated. I'm like, wait a minute, how did you jump another 20 million overnight?
Right.
And you have these numbers that they skew all the time. And so I don't really know if these numbers are actually accurate or not. But
I think it's very possible to lie with statistics. I mean, there's books written about it. Like, it's definitely possible.
Well, yeah, they're not counting the breakthrough cases in the United States. And so that is lying through statistics, where the rest of the world, like in Israel, anybody can go to DuckDuckGo, because Google is going to
algorithms, yeah.
The algorithm is going to censor you. But DuckDuckGo, and listen, in history, the people trying to suppress the truth were never the good guys.
No,
okay,
never.
They were never the good guys.
I seen that meme the other day. I like that.
Yeah, I like that one too. Yeah. But it's true. The truth will always fit on both shoes. Yes. The people suppressing the truth is never the good guys. The people bribing candy, trying to get candy to little kids so they can inject a needle to them, that's a drug dealer.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And drug dealers never care what happened to their clients. They just want you to still stay alive so they can still stick the needle on you more and more and more and get more money out of you.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So we need to start questioning like basic logic. Let's take back from all the letters and the esteem and whatever, smoke and mirrors to legitimize these people.
Right. White lab coats.
They're just drug dealers.
Right.
They're just drug dealers they're just glorified drug dealers trying to bribe children with candy so they can stick a needle in their arm.
Yep. Because they went to school for so many years, so they have the legal power to be a drug dealer and literally sell drugs.
Yeah.
Synthetic versions.
Right. And I always wonder, I was like, what do they have on this administration that like they would get them to, they did this in the last administration too, because they were starting. I mean, people have to remember that even under President Trump, he got 1 million so people inoculated with COVID-19 vaccines early too. Mm-hmm. So he's not completely exempt from getting people vaccinated under this little thing.
Totally.
Okay, and he even signed the paperwork to allow for the vaccination rollout.
Yep.
He actually said it was a good business deal. They
Oh
can
yeah.
continue to get more booster shots. What kind of business deal is that?
He's probably invested in the vaccines like Pfizer and all of them.
Yeah. So like I say, don't if you get so far into one or the other, you lose sight of seeing the truth.
Yep.
And the truth is, it's the same side of the same different arms of the same person,
Oh yeah.
of the same puppet master.
Yep.
Okay, that's the truth, and that fits on both shoes.
Yes.
Okay, so the thing, so what can we learn from what we're going through right now? From a Buddhist perspective, from writing 3 books on consciousness and how we create our reality in the higher dimensions,
Mm.
is one, people need to look at themselves honestly, and if they see themselves ever telling somebody else or wishing like they did like with Joe Rogan, like how dare he survive with
Right.
using human ivermectin so
Yep.
quickly? How dare that work on him? And prove it wrong, prove the propaganda wrong. But if anybody is wishing ill will on somebody, wishing them to die because they don't agree with you, then they really need to kind of have a self intervention
100%.
because um because if that is the reality they're going to create for themselves in these higher dimensions, if they don't already recognize that their life is a sham already, it's going
Right.
to get even worse.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so one, we have to recognize that that we are all connected to source, that we're all fractal expressions of source, that we
Mm.
all have Christ consciousness within, and that we all will and can create our reality individually and collectively. The collective one is on the table. It depends on what people are throwing into the pie and what
Mm.
the pie shakes out to look like.
Right.
I hope it's delicious, but we'll find out.
Right.
Um, but that's why we're here, because we wanted to play in the sandbox together.
Oh yeah.
So, but the thing that people need to also realize and understand is they need to get out of their cult mentality. Step away from the sides and come into the center for just a
Yes.
moment. Come into the center, and from coming into center, looking at the other information. I had
Oh
somebody
yeah.
who I'll give you an example. I finally started CVAR, which is a COVID vaccine adverse reaction podcast.
Mhm.
And it was created because some of my listeners of my Macabre Chakras, Buddhism in the Fifth Dimension podcast, which you can find on YouTube or pretty much anywhere. But
Yeah.
um, that I was getting people going, can you help us? We're getting censored. We want to just find each other so we can share our symptoms, so we can learn about what we're getting in the hospital, so we know how to self-advocate for ourselves because nobody knows what's going on with us.
Mhm.
Can you help us get us past the censorship? We just want to be heard so that we can help each other. We don't care what's happening with everybody else.
Right.
And so I was like, okay. So I did an interview with 2 women who were vaccine injured, and it really helped them kind of like throw a lot of trolls off of their scent, who were telling them that their injuries, that their pictures in the hospital, that their printouts of their doctor's visits was all misinformation, and
Mm.
somehow this is all fabrication and
Jeez.
lie. But anyways, it helped dispel that. And then I started looking at the censored information and be like, okay, this is interesting phenomenon. Let me look at the censored information. So I started looking at FDA reports. I started looking at the safety data. I started looking at the Pfizer clinical trials information. And the narrative doesn't shake up. It's not the truth. Because if it
Right.
was the truth, it would be the truth across the board. So if
100%.
you go to my Macabre Chakras episodes, there a lot of them lately have been looking at the censored information, and then it finally broke off into its own CVAR, which is a podcast dedicated to just people who are vaccine injured, so they can share resources and hope without censorship.
Mm.
And a lot of people are going through that. And I just recently interviewed a father in Texas who he lost his 16-year-old son after 5 days of getting the Pfizer first shot vaccine, and he just collapsed in the basketball court. And he's not fat. He doesn't have any pre-existing conditions. He's not taking medication for anything. He's a sports player. And the only thing that they can find was in the autopsy, his heart was double its size. So he had heart inflammation. It's a teenage boy that has heart inflammation. And, it's really sad. And you can see through his,
Unbelievable.
yeah. And so he
So
posted the
sad.
funeral. He posted the funeral pictures on his Facebook, and Facebook is trying to, it threatened to delete his account for posting the funeral about his deceased son who died because of the Pfizer jab. 5
Jeez.
days afterwards. And so he's getting censored. And so this is what's happening. And so I recorded the podcast. I shared it on my Facebook with my network. And even if I didn't share on my Facebook, my marketing already sends it across the ethers anyways. But
Mhm.
somebody, a woman commented and said that I'm an anti-vaxxer, I'm sharing misinformation, and she's
Jeez.
reporting me to Facebook. And I'm just
Jeez.
like,
Freaking carrots.
yeah, you
Ridiculous.
literally, this has been a substantiated story. You literally see the picture of the funeral. You see the vaccination card for the date that he had it. You
Right.
see the kid. You see the truth. And
Right.
yet you still see with your own eyes and go, misinformation, fake news, stop lying to everybody. This didn't really happen. You see the body in front of you. It's still misinformation. This is an example of how far into the polar opposites you have become,
Oh yeah.
so much so that you see yourself as separate from somebody else and you really wish death on them.
Right.
And
It's
you have no sympathy. You can't even see the truth for what you're seeing. And that is a dangerous place to be in your consciousness.
yeah, I don't know how you can like believe in Christ consciousness, but yet wish death upon another and say, you're saving lives because you got an experimental jab. Like I I just don't
Yeah.
think the two are equal. And I feel like so like the whole point of my podcast, Vaughn, is like I wanted to build a bridge between like the truth community, like the more conspiratorial community, and the spiritual community, because the spiritual community kind of gets a lot of flack for the anti-jab stuff, like saying like there is a lot of people that got the jabs that are in the spirituality community, so there's a
Yeah,
lot
there
of
are. I've interviewed some of them.
yeah, there's a lot of fighting going on for no like live and let live. Come on.
Yeah. The thing is that because I've interviewed some people on my podcast who are really for the vaccines, and they do
Mhm.
support the mandates, and they do support the coercion efforts because they really do believe that that's the only way out. And the
Right.
reason why is because they are so far into the polarized viewpoint, into the separatism,
Yep.
that, like I said, they have been so far removed from the center that they cease to see the other side of the ocean
Right.
that's right in front of them. To see the other side of the bridge is right in front of them. They're so far.
It's like
And
they've
I've in
tattooed it to themselves like this is a part of me. Like I don't know who I am without it. Like as far as like your political party. It's like
Yeah,
so ingrained.
yeah, yeah. So that's a life lesson.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's a life lesson, and that is something for them to learn. And I get it. I totally get it. I don't blame
Right.
anybody for doing that. I understand it. But the thing is that sometimes some things are life lessons, and the only way you're going to learn is through firsthand experience.
Yep.
So for people who have no empathy for the suffering of others, because those people are breaking your illusion of it being safe and effective 100% for everybody, and everybody should get it. They scare them. The truth scares them
Oh
that they
yeah.
will reject it
Yep.
until it happens to them or somebody in the family.
Yep.
And then they're forced to deal with it. And what happens when they're forced to deal with it, and I've interviewed some of these people who they used to demonize the unvaccinated,
Right.
and then they got a serious case, and somebody in the family got jabbed and passed on for various adverse reactions.
Hmm.
Um, and what I've noticed is many who are injured by the jab, they self-shame themselves for being injured. Like, how dare I not be okay? How
Right.
dare I have an adverse reaction and show that this is not 100% safe and effective? And when I tell my story to other people, they're like, how dare you tell me it's not safe and effective, because I don't want that to be my reality.
Right.
So
They
there's a
don't want
lot
to
of
face
like,
reality. Yeah.
they don't want to face it. I want to keep my head in the clouds
Yep.
until something happens. How
Yep.
dare you tell me that it didn't work for you?
Yep.
You
And
know?
if we can't empathize with others and not realize it till it's on our doorstep, like we're not going to grow. It's like we're afraid to leave our comfort zones, and like we're
Yeah.
comfortable in these safe little, oh, we got it all figured out. It's like nihilism at its finest. Like,
No, you don't have it. You don't have it all figured out. And that's the thing that people don't understand, because like I said earlier, source is like a pendulum. It goes back and forth, and eventually winds down to the middle, because the only way you're going to get through it is together. Okay?
yes.
And nobody knows anything about what's going to happen this winter. Okay,
Mm,
nobody knows when the cold and flu season comes hitting at the door. Nobody knows, because everybody's perspective is completely valid, because there's no long-term safety data. Nobody knows.
right.
So everybody's predictions, everybody's worries, everybody's concern is completely valid, because nobody knows.
100%.
Okay,
100%.
but so the thing is that in Buddhism, you pre-plan your life and you pre-plan how you're going to go. But when you get incarnated on Earth, all that you get into amnesia, all that is wiped clean, so that you can have the experience, so that it can be really real to you. Okay, so that you can hit home in your soul. When you no longer have a body and it's gone, you know what it felt like to be scared, to have other people be so scared of you that they wish you to die.
Mm,
And that's literally what many people in the vaccinated community are doing about the unvaccinated. They are
oh
so
yeah.
scared about getting sick that they wish the unvaccinated to die.
Oh yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Don't be surprised if around the corner, the only ones who are around to take care of you are the unvaccinated.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to humble yourself, and you have to eat your own words, and you have to make up.
Right.
Because the only way you're going to get help is if that unvaccinated member of your family who isn't sick
Takes
is the
care of
one
'em.
walking around taking care of everybody else.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a lot of forgiveness. There's a lot of forgiveness. There's a
Oh yeah.
lot of empathy. There's a lot of compassion around the corner, and we haven't gotten to first base yet. So
Oh yeah.
don't worry, you guys. The life lesson is coming for
Oh yeah.
everybody.
Oh yeah. Gotta face it. Can't run.
Can't run. I know every Buddhist knows this, and so we're just kind of going back, going, okay, woo. I know this.
Deep breaths.
I'm
Deep breaths.
deep breaths. I know this, and so I just sit there and I'm just kind of like, okay, we just gotta talk about this in a compassionate manner, because when you look at in Buddhist iconology, and you look at like Kuan Yin, and you look at Tara, and you look at Buddha, and you're like, how could you be so damn compassionate when
Oh
people
yeah.
are so rude and cunning and manipulated and mean to you? How can you be so compassionate? Well,
Mm,
they lived in experiences whereby they were really being persecuted by others, and then others suffered such horrible deaths and experiences that only a cruel person would not respond with empathy and compassion and forgiveness. And if you're connected to Christ consciousness, that's not in your fiber.
right.
Okay. Even your worst enemy that split your tires, or
Right.
or you know
You know deep in your
anything.
heart what's right or wrong.
Yeah, even as it's sitting there, gasping for the last air and going, please get my dog, you're like,
Right.
give me Pookie, come on.
Yeah.
I'll
You
find you a
got
good home.
you got to know karma will play its course, like you don't have to seek revenge when that will end up hurting you more than them. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Yeah, the universe has a way. People have already planned out their life lessons and their hard knocks. Okay,
Mm,
you don't need to make it worse for them.
right.
Okay, they are going to fall on their own sword.
Choose your battles wisely.
Yeah, just do the best you can to navigate the terrain so that you don't get harm,
Yep.
and so that you can live peacefully and you can navigate, and then put those pebbles in those movements and so forth to push in the reality that you want. It will pile up and fold over to whatever comes out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But and we'll get through this. um
100%.
so I don't know what's around the corner, but I do know there's going to be a lot of compassion, forgiveness, and empathy.
Do you I totally agree. I guess, we hear about, like this great reset that's coming, and but I also feel like we have two paths, and I was talking about this on my last episode. Like, we have two paths in front of us of where we can go.
Mm-hmm.
One's the way of truth and freedom and love, and the other is, separation, deceit, and fear. It's like, which path are we going to choose? And that's up to us, on an individual level. Each of us has that offer, and we have the free will to choose which path we're going to walk down. And if we walk down the path of truth and freedom and love, like, I think that will
Yeah,
change the world, and I think it's very possible.
yeah. But the path of truth or freedom or love are great in words until you apply it. And it's
Right.
hard to see which path is a truth or freedom or love. So this is what this is my observation.
Hmm.
Okay. Being an Asian female Buddhist that is not political at all
Right.
and neutral. So in terms of this discussion of the vaccination rollout and the tyranny that ensues following it,
Hmm.
if we allow it, is worldwide. Is okay. Everybody wants to live together. Everybody wants to love together. Everybody wants peace and harmony, etc.
Hmm.
How they want that is different from everybody. The way that they see that.
Right.
So you see one camp that's going, well, the way in which we can get back to normal is everybody get jabbed and keep getting jabbed based on the government's timeline, and
Right.
just go along with the passports, go along with the mandates, just go along and comply with the social credit system. Just go along with it; it'll be just fine.
Yep.
And if you
Be
don't
just
go along
fine.
with it, yeah, if you don't go along with it, it's too bad for you because you're not part of the society. So
Yep.
so you're going to be marginalized. You guys going to be marginalized. You guys going to get ostracized in society, and we completely support the ostracization, the marginalization, and the demonization and separatism of people who don't go along with this society, and that is totally fine, and we're okay with that
Right.
because we're healthy and we're surviving. And in order for us to move on, um, if you don't comply and you don't want to do it. Then we're going to do various coercion techniques. We're going to use media to slant articles and slant news to make it look like you're the problem. So you might as well just submit. We're
Oh yeah.
going to use mandates to force you jab or job. And
Oh
if
yeah.
you don't want to jab, then no job, no pay. We're just going to put you on unpaid leave, so you can't get unemployment. Well, how ethical is that? You
It's
can't go to the
insanity.
grocery store without getting a jab. You can't, participate in society. You can't do anything without getting a jab. Your kids, if they aren't jabbed yet, they can't go to school. But that's okay because we are going to make it through it if everybody just complies. Okay.
Good luck
Does
with
that
that.
sound? Does that sound like a world where full of Christed individuals?
Hell no.
Okay, does that sound like a world, even if you're vaccinated, does that
Right.
sound like a world that you want to support to come into fruition?
Right.
And even in this reality, per se, if you are vaccinated, which everybody's vaccinated in this reality,
Hmm.
and you get an adverse reaction eventually, or you die from it, no one will hear from you
Right.
because they're going to suppress your information Your
Yep.
Facebook account will, or your social media accounts will be suppressed and it'll be deleted. You will be deleted as if you never existed, and all your family members that remember you will be forced to never tell and talk about your adverse reaction or your symptoms or your injury ever to anybody else. Otherwise, they will be punished in the social credit system for
Oh yeah.
telling the truth that you suffered an adverse reaction from the jab.
Yep.
Okay, and that is your reality.
Step in
Will you
line or
some?
get lost.
Yeah. So everybody needs to look in the mirror and be like, is this the reality that they want for themselves, for their kids? Because
100%.
that is exactly what is going on, and that is the truth of what's going on. And if you can step back from your polarized cult political identities and stand in the center and look at both of it and canvas all the information, that is the truth, and it fits on both shoes,
Mm,
vaccinated and unvaccinated.
mm.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
The truth fits
So
in both shoes.
the truth fits on both shoes. And the Buddhists, typically, a true Buddhist, I actually had an argument with a yoga Buddhist instructor
Hmm.
who was trying to shame me for being unvaccinated.
Jeez.
And I said, well, listen, I can tell that you're not a lion because demonizing, separating, and marginalizing people so to separate them so you can control and so you can manipulate and do all these different coercion techniques, shaming people, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Those are antics of the wolves.
Yep.
Lions will never do that. They let everybody roam in the
Yep.
plains.
Preying on the sheep.
Yeah, they let everybody roam and do what they want. If somebody steps too far out of line and they push the line so much, then of course they're gonna get a roar. But for the most part, you don't really see lions walking around like bullying everybody in the plains. They
Right.
respect the lion, and the lion just watches and eventually does something when it has to. Okay, it allows everybody to exist in the colony as they should.
Hmm.
It allows the cycle to run through. So, and so, he didn't have anything to say. And I said, well, that's the difference. That's the difference. Okay.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and that's like I said, I want to build a bridge between, spirituality and the whole conspiracy community because like I feel like they both need each other. Like it's all about balance. Like everything is balance and just realizing that with the two together like you can
Yeah.
understand reality and live up to your true potential
Yeah.
and not live in fear.
Right. And Source is funny in that Source will always find a creative way to pull people together. So
Oh yeah.
the conspiratorial community that's been talking about the Great Reset for
Right.
a long time,
Oh yeah.
yeah, they have been pulled into mainstream because now you have Yahoo Finance and Bloomberg News, which is a high finance stock firm, and they have their own channel.
Hmm.
All they do is cover the Great Reset and
Oh
Charles
geez.
Schwab, and it's like, oh, this is coming from investors group that's talking about this.
Oh yeah.
They're the biggest conspiracists. It's the
Yep.
investors group. Wall Street is talking about the Great Reset and Charles
Right.
Schwab and the Economic Forum.
Right.
So now everybody's in the same boat.
Oh yeah.
Source always finds a way to pull everybody in to the same
Yes.
pool, and yeah. Now you guys got to figure out how to go together.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this whole thing it has been like a massive wake up call to many people in the world, and it's kind of shaken up their perception of reality. And that can go a number of ways, but like even look at like mental health, like the toll it's taken on people's mental health, and I can't imagine like um, the long term effects of like baby psychologies looking at their mothers in mass and
Yeah,
just all these abnormal behaviors that people are going
yeah.
through. I mean, the
Well,
suicide rates and all that stuff.
right, right. Well, I think in the 50s there was you guys can look this up. There was I think it was in the Ukraine or Soviet Union somewhere. Um, but they had a bunch of orphanages of children who, basically lost their parents from the war.
Mm,
And they would clothe and feed them, but then
mhm.
they'll put them down in the beds and they never held them. And like a high percentage, more than half of them died. The infants
Wow.
died
Makes
because
sense.
they were never touched. They were never given
Never
affection.
nurtured. Yeah.
They were never nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that was nurtured, that got held more often, they survived.
Mm,
So humans, we exist because of each other. And these strategies to separate each other, stay in your homes, shelter in place is another word for lockdown.
oh yeah.
Um, but um,
I
but
love these
lockdown is,
code words.
yeah, lockdown is just another way to kind of like get you to accept
Yep.
it's just shelter in place.
Yeah.
It's
Let's
not
make
a
it a little
lockdown.
cuter so it sounds trendier than like
Yeah,
it really
yeah.
is.
It was really funny because my husband and I read in the 2020 CDC report, they were recommending this approach to take all the high risk and then put them basically in a concentration camp or quarantine area is what they
Oh
called them.
yeah. Yeah. I
And they
saw
called
that.
it shielding. It's the shielding technique. We're gonna shield these high risk people from
What?
society. You can look at it on CDC's website. I'm from 2020
Ridiculous.
when COVID hit, they're like, we're gonna shield these the elderly, the high risk people with compromised health. We're gonna put them into their own little area, and then in the CDC report, we're going to make sure that they cannot communicate with their families or anybody from the outside world. No one can communicate with them because they risk catching COVID from outsiders. So they're in their own little quarantine camp,
Mm,
concentration camp. And this is the shielding approach. We're shielding them from harm.
ridiculous.
So it's just a plain words.
Oh
Okay, so you
yeah.
basically just put the high risk people and all that into a concentration camp and basically leave them there.
Oh yeah.
Here's another thing that people need to really, really start looking at stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Israel is highly vaccinated, and and you can look this up in DuckDuckGo. The largest hospital in Israel, the director said that about 95% of the severely hospitalized are vaccinated.
Oh
The
yeah.
unvaccinated are really because they're giving them ivermectin. Okay,
Mm,
they're giving ivermectin. They just do the everything out the window and said, "Oh well, vax, unvax, everybody's in the same boat, so we're just giving everybody ivermectin." And the
yeah.
majority of them are recovering at the hospitals and going home. But the severely injured are the ones who are vaccinated. But 95% of the really severely ones that the ivermectin early treatment is not working on them.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctors, I forgot the doctor's name, but the doctors in Israel are talking to each other and going, "What we're noticing is that the vaccinated are incubation center. They're creating COVID out of their own bodies, and
Mm,
they're basically spreading it,
right.
which is the controversial spike protein. Okay, COVID-19 has the spike protein, which is bad for the human body.
Right.
The animal trials in the Pfizer document, which I'll send you to so you can put in the show description so people can read it.
Yeah. Yeah. For
When
sure.
you read the animal trials in the Pfizer document that was presented to the FDA to get approval for this experimental jab,
Mm-hmm.
the animals within 2 years all developed COVID-19. All of it.
Wow.
All of it developed COVID-19. They didn't have it previously. They all developed it. So that was a success in duplicating COVID-19 in their body. The idea, according to the document, is that if they develop the COVID-19, which is the spike protein, so their
Right.
body is creating the spike protein. If they develop in their body, then they can build the antibodies, and the body can recognize that version of the flu, and then
Right.
fight off in the future. The problem with that version of the flu is the spike protein is dangerous to people, and it's the coronavirus, the spike protein coronavirus, according to report, is a respiratory disease in dogs.
Mm,
The only reason why it jumped from animals to humans because it was spliced.
mm.
And Pfizer owns the patent for the coronavirus spike protein that they extracted in dogs, respiratory disease,
Yeah. Yeah. I think I
and
heard
now all of
that.
a sudden it's in this version of the human version of contractable COVID-19. So,
Mm.
anyways, that all will come out. The truth always come out. That will always come out.
Oh yeah, truth
But
always comes to light.
the truth always comes to light. Unfortunately, it's always a little bit too late, and
Right.
there's too many casualties. But that's just the human story.
Yeah.
But
Nature's got to run its course.
nature's got to run. Nature's got to run its course. And so, like I try not to be too dire because it's part of people's pre-life plan and
Right.
their experience. But for those who there are people now who have lost family members from the COVID vaccine who didn't mesh so well with them.
Oh yeah.
And I've been speaking to people, they lost like 7 people in their family or 3 people in their family or whatever. They're like the lone ranger in their family.
Right.
And they're going through some serious mental health depression about being the only person in the family who didn't get the jab and didn't die or suffer from adverse reaction.
Right.
Okay, this is like people in other countries where they rolled it out really, really early before the United States. And so um, down the road, if what's happening in other countries start cropping up in the United States and all the other countries that rolled out later,
Mm-hmm.
the potential is you're going to have people who are the lone ranger in their family who are caring for everybody in their family who's still alive or who's going through adverse reactions or who all have COVID or whatever. And they're the caregiver now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're running ragged being the caregiver. And at the same time, they have to face the mortality of their family members and face that they may be the only living survivor or very few of the survivors in their family genes.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to deal with the cleanup. How do I consolidate all the houses? How do I consolidate all the furniture by myself?
Right.
Okay, and there because I have that CVAR podcast and I'm talking to these people and they're going through so much internal turmoil with the family members in their family that have died
Mm.
who got the jab
Right.
and they're the early recipients of this reality. Okay. And so you know, they want to talk but now their time is just
I've,
filled with trying to get rid of furniture, trying to consolidate houses, trying to consolidate bank accounts, trying to, all these other kind of things and so forth. So, they're going through cleanup.
I feel like the vaccine death family members that deal with these deaths from the vaccine is very similar to like family members that had family members that died in 9/11 and
Mm-hmm.
them viewing it going down a different way than the story we were given, and
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
chastised and shamed for thinking otherwise, just like
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
today with this vaccine.
Right. Well, and with regards to 9/11, I mean, there were people in 9/11 who were like, "Why did I survive?" And they have
Right.
kind of the guilt and shame for
Oh yeah,
surviving.
for sure. It's like coming
And
back
they
from
had,
war and your whole
yeah.
platoon got destroyed.
Right, like PTSD. There's going to be a lot of so the people that survive, and even some of the vaccinated, not all the vaccinated. I'm hoping. We don't know this because the safety data is not out there. So everybody's prediction is valid.
Right.
But let's say one of the predictions is the people who are vaccinated, not all of them get adverse reactions and die within the next 2-3 years, like the animal studies,
Mm-hmm.
which I hope is the reality.
Right.
Okay, I hope that is the reality that they all don't suffer adverse reactions. And
100%. Yeah.
but so they survive and
Mm-hmm.
they would live because most of my family members got it and they have kids and I want them to survive so they can take care of the kids
Likewise.
even if
Yes.
even if they're slightly gimping. Okay, I still
100%.
want
Yeah.
them to
Exactly.
I,
I don't wish death upon anyone,
I
no
don't want
matter
you
what
to
they choose.
yeah. But
We're all humans.
yeah, they're all humans and I understand that and I respect that and so forth. So like I said, there is going to be a huge wave of empathy and compassion and forgiveness
Oh
that
yeah.
humanity is going to experience worldwide.
Right.
And the people who are healthy are going to be doing a lot of work and they're going to need a lot of support because they're going through PTSD, they're
Mm.
going through guilt,
Oh
and they
yeah.
need a lot of support and their family members are not going to be able to support them because they're not going to be there.
Right.
Or if they're still there, they're not there in the capacity that they were before because they need the care.
And it takes a
And
lot of your energy to care for
to be a
others.
oh my God, if you've ever
Yeah.
been a caregiver, I've been a caregiver for my handicapped brother, and it takes I constantly working out, eating
Mhm.
right, just trying to stay healthy so I can lift him. Caregivers, every caregiver knows that it is a full-time job and
Oh
it's
yeah.
emotionally and physically draining to take care of a family member. Now, let's say
100%.
you have in the next couple of years, not one, but you have two or three family members that need constant care.
Hmm.
Okay.
I can't
That
imagine that.
person, yeah, that person is going to be going through an enormous amount of stress to be a caregiver, and they need an enormous amount of support and love and kind of, help from everybody
Right.
needs to support, give them emotional encouragement. We're gonna need to emotionally encourage each other.
Yes.
And even people who are vaccinated and they don't have adverse reactions and so forth, they need to they need to find the compassion and humanity in each other
Yep.
and kind of help each other out because they're going to be caregivers.
Oh yeah.
We're going into a caregiver society. That's
Oh
really
yeah.
what's happening. We're going to a caregiver society, and in order to get through the next couple years, we're really going to have to kind of lean on each other and
Oh
help
yeah.
each other and support each other. Facebook is going to go back to social media therapy. Right now, it's a social
Right.
media. I
Oh
want
yeah.
you should die, you should not die, and everybody's throwing
Yeah.
their knives out in words.
Yeah. I learned a long time ago to pick my battles wisely, and it's
Yeah,
not worth the energy. Like
yeah.
you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. I still
Yeah.
plant seeds and hope some trees grow from them, but man, it's rough out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it is, but it will eventually turn back
Hmm.
into social media therapy where everybody's giving each other therapy.
Yeah.
Everybody's
I
going in
like
for
that.
therapy.
Yeah.
Like like I'm a caregiver for three of my family members and sometimes I just need to hear that I'm doing
Yeah.
good. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, you're doing
I'm
good.
here
I'm
for
doing good
you.
too. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
You could do it. I got
Yeah.
five family members. You could do it. I adopted my niece and nephew because, it all happened to the parents,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But
Keyboard
and
cheerleaders.
yeah, we'll be keyboard cheerleaders of each
Yep.
other. So I
Yep.
mean, it's going to be compassion, empathy,
Oh yeah.
unconditional love, to the likes that nobody's ever heard of in this reality, and we're all going to be keyboard, supporters of each other. So
Oh yeah.
that's coming. That's coming, you guys. That's what's coming, and we're no longer going to be fighting between the vax and unvax and mandates and passports because at that point, no one's going to give a crap. They're just going
Yep.
to try to get through it and support each other through the hard times because the hard times is the adverse reactions that crop up.
Oh yeah.
It's happening in other countries. It will happen in the United States.
And I think
100%.
in our lowest times we learn the most, about
Yeah.
ourselves and about each other.
Yeah. We got through 9/11
Yep.
as a country. We'll get through
Through
this
this.
tyranny. We'll push back this tyranny together.
Yep.
Um,
Staying
and
strong.
yeah, and we'll stay strong and we will get through these adverse reactions together as well. And that's what's going on for many people in other countries. That's what they're seeing. That's what people are experiencing. Um, I talk to these people all over the world, and that's what they're saying. And they're saying the United States is in for a rude awakening, a wake up call when these people start knocking down the hospitals with their random weird illnesses, and they've all been jabbed.
Mm.
Um, or even some are unjabbed, but for whatever reason they're catching vid from all the jab in their family or whatever the deal is. I
Right.
don't know. So that information is still coming through,
Well,
but
there's that shedding theory or whatever.
yeah, there's that.
I have heard that.
Yeah, which again, like we said, all possibilities could be true because there's no
Right.
safety data. We don't
Yep.
know. We don't know.
Exactly. It's a
So
grand experiment.
yeah, and it is if you ever wanted to be born in a time, well, this is a digital time
Right.
where we literally will tear each other apart and then we'll build each other back up with love and compassion. We're getting into that.
Oh yeah. I think it's very similar to like it's like we're taught dare in school, and like,
Yeah.
just say no. And it's like, it's like taking a drug you haven't tested. So there might be
Uh-huh.
fentanyl in there if like it's cocaine or pills or
Uh-huh.
something. And it's like, I don't think I'm going to take that risk. Like, I'm not going to listen to your peer pressure. Like,
Uh-huh.
come on, guys, it's cool to do this. Or, we're
Uh-huh.
told to say no. But with
Yeah.
this, it's like, no,
Did
it's for
Dare
your
work
health.
on you?
Right?
It's
It's crazy.
because now you're being tested, and obviously most people at Dare do not work on them.
Yep.
So, anyways, I don't know. We don't know. We should
Right.
do a 6 months follow-up on
Yep.
this interview to talk about what happens
Totally.
after the winter, and this conversation might change a little
Definitely.
bit, because now we'll have real
Right.
things are happening, and
As it
we're
plays
gonna,
out.
as it plays out. Yeah, we're commentating on this reality as it plays out in
Oh,
real
yeah.
time,
I love it.
and yeah, and it's gonna be interesting.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So far, it's been very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a crazy time to be alive. I think we're living through history in the making. Like, and, I think there's a beautiful future ahead of us. It just depends on how are we looking at the glass? Is it half empty or half full? And that's up to us to see what future we want for ourselves.
Exactly, love it.
But yeah, any last words for the listeners? This has been an amazing conversation, Bon, and I thank you so much for coming on my show. And I look forward to many talks in the future.
Yeah, yeah. The only message that I have for everybody is, um, stay out of the sidelines and come into the middle.
Mm,
Okay, because when you come into middle, you can look at all sides from a semi neutral perspective and then make the best decision for you for your next best experience. So, if you are finding yourself saying, wishing ill will to others who are not in your camp, you are so far onto the extremes that you need to come back to the center, because when you're so far in the extreme, you lose your ability to gain access to resources that are critical to your survival and your well-being.
mm.
Okay, because you're in the fringes now.
Gotta look outside the black and white and see the gray.
Exactly, exactly. Live in the center, put your hands together, and that's the blessing. That's the blessing that you see. And yep, that's the Buddhist blessing that you see is put your
Mm,
hands together and give thanks for the
yes.
experience that you have. Stay this neutral, stay in the middle, because that is the best position when you're going through a storm.
Yes.
Okay.
Just gotta keep floating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it, Vaughn. Yeah, I guess if you could just tell the listeners real quick where they can find you.
Yeah. So everybody, the website is Merkaba Chakras. So Merkaba, Merkaba, and then chakras, like your 7 chakras. So merkabachakras.com. And from there, you can find my 2 podcasts, which is Merkaba Chakras, which is Buddhism in the Fifth Dimension. And then you can find my newest podcast, which is CVAR, COVID Vaccine Averse Reactions, and you hear real stories from real people who are going through their injuries and sharing resources, sharing symptoms, sharing what they're getting from doctors all around the world, all around the country, so that they can help each other. So if you experience that or somebody that you love are starting to experience that, there is a resource, and that is your resource right there instead of a 5-minute clip on the news that doesn't really go over anything that's going to help you out.
Mm,
So the 2 podcasts is there, and then for my books, there's a book in my website. You can click on the book links, and then you'll see all the Buddhism links. Just click on it. It'll take you straight to Amazon, and you just buy it off Amazon. And once you buy it, they print it and they send it to you guys. So I recommend at this time everybody read the Buddhist Mandalas series, and basically there's 3 Buddhism books. All 3 are really, really good because it will help you get through um, the next 6 months on
yes.
planet Earth. And I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen because you don't want to hear it anyways. You have to experience it.
Yes. Life would be pointless if that wasn't the case. So I totally second that. I really enjoyed your first book, and I can't wait to dive into the second. And I really love the light and love you're bringing into this world, Bon, and using your voice to uplift others and inspire others. And yeah, I'm forever grateful to you for sitting down and having this conversation. And I'll put the links in the description for everything you just mentioned. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone for listening out there, and hope you all have a good week.